The mistress squealed when the plunger went up her blank.
Up her sewage system?
You're disgusting.
Wait, wrong thing, sorry. I feel like I don't see anyone talking about Modok lately, so let's talk about Modok. Why is anyone talking about Modok? You just can't keep this guy from talking about Modok. It's fascinating to me how quickly this show lost relevance because I feel like it'd be something everyone would be talking about for at least a little while. What little discussion I did hear of it within the first few hours of the show's existence before complete silence were conflicting reports that it was pretty good, and others that it was miserably terrible. I was interested to see how the sense of humor worked because this character isn't really known for being hilarious, so I decided to check it out for myself and was surprised to find out that the answer wasn't quite as simple as good or terrible. It's all over the place! Modok on Hulu is a stop-motion animated sitcom about the somewhat obscure Marvel supervillain of the same name. He's a giant head in a floating robot chair with tiny limbs, and he's a mad scientist that runs a terrorist organization bent on world domination. And he's not really that funny in the comics, which the show adapted perfectly by also not being that funny. Oh my god, the fucking ice cream man is here? Holy shit. Okay, I'm back. I got one of those Spider-Man popsicles. In the show, they try to humanize the, subject to debate, M-word, organism designed only for killing, by giving him a wacky sitcom family of tropey characters we've seen a million times before. Such as an awkward teen boy whose father doesn't understand his eccentricity, or a sarcastic teenage girl, and an attractive and well-put-together wife that's way too good for him. Over the 10 episodes of this show, I felt myself losing interest constantly and had to force myself to continue it just because it kept falling flat, and I was desperate for it to finally find its footing. Maybe I was just morbidly curious, or some part of me also wanted it to finally get good. I didn't want this show to be bad because I do like the concept of an adult animated comedy show set in the Marvel Universe. Deadpool got canned, so this is all you get, bitches. I'm a big fan of variety, and that would be a really big change of pace from the usual MCU live-action shows or the more kid-oriented animated stuff that's on TV right now. If this show was done right, it'd be a really interesting standout among the rest of the infinite tidal wave of Marvel-based media vomiting forth from our televisions like Arnim Zola after a wild Hydra kegger party. As the season went on, I felt like it finally started to work on some level as a comedy and had a few bits that definitely made me laugh or double take, but there was still just a lot of dead air between those where it was floundering on just about every other level. Something about this show just didn't work, and I want to figure out, why was Modok such a misfire? AIM is bought out by a shady tech company that's run by evil space aliens and probably tries to monitor people's data without their consent. If anything, AIM is now spying on people like you for nefarious purposes. That's why Atlas VPN is a smart choice, especially with their new $1.39 a month deal for the first 3 years. Atlas VPN encrypts all the data you send, but is also a great help for everyday life. You can stop space aliens and hackers alike from viewing your personal information with it, but you can also use it for entertainment. Atlas VPN gives you access to geo-blocked libraries on streaming platforms such as Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, HBO, and many more. If you live abroad and want to check out shows like Modok for yourself, it's a great choice. And of course, Atlas can help to avoid censorship when traveling abroad and increase your security on public internet connections and get the best deals on airline tickets and hotels. It can also block malicious third-party links and ads, share files and download torrents privately and securely, and their new data breach system is a major help. By inserting your email address, the data breach tool scans the internet to see if it ended up in any recorded data breaches or data dumps that include emails, names, passwords, and other sensitive information. Enabling notifications ensures that you are aware of such incidents and gives you heads up to change your password before anyone has a chance to steal your accounts. Currently, Atlas VPN is running a huge discount on their 3-year deal for just $139 per month with a 30-day money-back guarantee. The deal won't last for long, so make sure to check it out by clicking the link in the description below. It helps me a lot. Let's take it back to the show's roots. As of 2019, Modok was planned to be part of a whole lineup of adult animated comedy shows based on Marvel Comics, including Hit Monkey, also known as that really stupid concept introduced in one Deadpool storyline that was never funny or interesting beyond the initial absurdity of a monkey with guns, Tigra and Dazzler, which had some potential just based on how interesting Dazzler's powers are, and Howard the Duck, who is probably the only character in this proposed plan that an animated adult sitcom would actually work really well for, because the comics are basically just already that. These shows would cross over into one big special titled The Offenders. Ah, that's funny. But then in December of that year, Marvel Television was brought in to be part of Marvel Studios. no doubt in preparation for all the Disney Plus shows. With this being too adult for Disney, it got pushed off onto Hulu like so many LGBT teenagers before it. And with that merger, Marvel Studios decided not to do any of the other series, leaving Modok the sole survivor of what would have been something much bigger and more ambitious and probably very annoying if all of them were the same as this one. I feel like that should have worked to this show's benefit, because now the attention isn't spread thin over 4 or 5 shows that are excessively identical in presentation. The producers and writers could just keep their big radiant robot heads focused firmly on this one and make it the best it could be. But the final product still lacks in a lot of areas. The main story arc of the first season is that Modok's organization, AIM, has been bought out by a big tech company, and his role as its leader is continually reduced by an annoying new boss and a board of directors that are secretly the main antagonists. This causes Modok's relationship with his family to strain, so his wife comes to her senses and finally separates from him until he starts to get his act together. The show's main story arc is Modok learning to be a better guy to his family and trying to take his place back at the top of AIM so he can get back on track to world domination. While he's in a rut, he goes on a few adventures that only a show set in the Marvel Universe could provide, like time traveling, assembling a team of obscure loser villains to break into Avengers Tower to impress more well-known and successful supervillains, and getting lost in the forest outskirts of Asgard with his son. These ones listed are the standouts because a lot of the other episodes feel like filler or don't utilize the potential of the setting as well for an interesting or funny story. Like Modok and his family are caught in a death trap designed by that villain Arcade, who you may remember from that Marvel Ultimate Alliance mission. And instead of something really creative and elaborate, the majority of the episode is spent in one room where the trap is just to figure out which family member is a robot. It's no secret that this show is meant to be like Marvel's answer to Harley Quinn, as that's a show about C-list supervillains doing funny stuff in a more lighthearted version of the DC universe. On the surface level, it's the same basic idea, but the execution is sloppier in Modok. For one, Harley Quinn is able to still keep its identity strongly tied to the characters of the comics. Everyone in that show still is kind of like them, you know? Some kind of clever spin on how they are in the books. Either by exaggerating their personalities to be more humorous, or like playing off the fact that Clayface is an unhinged failed actor, or having Aquaman be a total bro. Props to Harley Quinn for putting some respect on Aquaman's name. He beats up almost the entire Legion of Doom by himself in one episode. In other cases, the show can play off a character by making them less exaggerated than their comic counterparts, like making Poison Ivy feel more like a regular person who just happens to be a supervillain on the side, but still keeping her priorities and goals the same. It makes her a good straight man for the more silly characters. Harley Quinn has its character dynamics figured out for the best comedy. With Modok, everyone from the comics basically had their personality thrown out and an entirely new one created for them as the silly, wacky one that acts dumb sometimes. And every original character created to fill out the cast is also the silly, wacky one that acts dumb sometimes. There's not really a straight man to bounce the absurdity off of. Everyone's the quote-unquote funny one. It's like if The Office was just Michael Scott wearing different colored hats at every desk. Modok is a super intelligent computer brain that considers human life inferior, but now he's just a schlubby dad that's a little full of himself and wants to rule the world out of some kind of inferiority complex. I suppose the only characters that sort of resemble themselves are Wonder Man and Iron Man, but they're used very sparingly and still just kind of the dumb one. I will say that Nathan Fillion as Wonder Man is fantastic casting, and I'm glad he got to play him in this after his part in the MCU was unfortunately cut. Part of me wonders how this show will play for people whose first introduction to Modok and Monica Rappaccini is the Avengers games, since that's their most mainstream appearance so far.
No, Modok, you can't! I love you! I have Crohn's disease!
He doesn't have Crohn's disease. If anyone has undiagnosed Crohn's disease, it's me. And I do.
The adolescent cub turned on me, snarling, frothing at the mouth. Darwin bought me a few precious moments to call for help. My dad shot the wolf.
I'm not gonna bullshit you and say I was a huge Modok fan and I'm annoyed they changed his personality from the comics. I reserve that for characters I like. I really don't care that they changed him to fit a comedy show, but I find it a little disheartening that they made him such a boring stereotype. How many sitcoms, animated or otherwise, are about an inept, insensitive dad that's always inadvertently terrorizing his family with shenanigans? And the fact that the family they invented for him are so generic and predictable really doesn't make this show feel special. Beyond the cast's archetypes feeling played out and unclever, I think the show is weighed down by its direction and voice acting, because on paper, I feel like a lot of these jokes would be funny if I was reading them as a screenplay. Yet the way they're brought to life falls flat for me about 80% of the time.
And now, a message from our sponsors, which is us in this case, but yeah, you know what I mean.
If every single one of my Twitter followers donated $1 a month, I'd be able to do this job forever and fund bigger and better projects than ever before. I know it's a pain in the butt, but please consider donating through the Patreon if you want my channel to stick around for a long time. And as I've tried to boost my production quality this past year, I've taken on a whole lot of help from friends, and I'd love to be able to consistently compensate them for all of their hard work that helps keep the channel up and running. From my pals Ben and Diego helping me edit and co-write a few reviews, Molly creating storyboards for live action projects, Jacob's help with brainstorming, animation, color correction, and video thumbnails, and my buddy William putting in tons of work on insane 3D animated ideas. Making sure I can continue to pay my friends and coworkers for their creative input is a top priority for me, but beyond that, we want to expand the channel into something bigger and one day move all of us together into the same city and rent our own studio so we can crank out videos and movies and animations like a well-oiled machine. No, that would be possible without your generous donation, and your pledge will help all of our crazy ambitious dreams come true for, again, just $1 a month. I'm reorganizing my Patreon to have a only $1 tier for the same content. Behind the scenes videos, polls, status updates, and more for just $1 for everyone. I think we can totally make this goal, so let's do it. Okay, I shouldn't even have to put in this aside, but I understand that comedy is the most subjective thing in the world, and what I find funny may not be the same as what you find funny, dear viewer. I also understand that it's hard to be funny consistently, and not every joke I tell always lands successfully. So bear in mind that while I'm talking about this part, it's entirely from my perspective. When I say the show isn't funny or something didn't work, just put an imaginary ellipsis in the words, "in the eyes of Xavier," or "from Xavier's perspective." So you don't need to type up 7 paragraphs explaining to me that the show was hysterical. Like, I get it if you liked it, and I can concede that there are some good bits, but this is an opinion piece and not a factual data sheet based on what's been scientifically proven to be funny or unfunny by a team of expert researchers in the field of funonomics. God damn. Anyway, so this show's as funny as a cancer diagnosis most of the time, and I just watch it totally stone-faced, waiting for something interesting to happen, and then it never does. As I said, on paper, a lot of the humor could work, but often the delivery kills it.
By the way, I hope kids were not in the picture because the crystal you're holding is highly radioactive. Definitely sterile now. Your balls are completely useless, purely for show.
This show could really use a quick pace where the comedy is just on full blast and they're telling joke after joke after joke. Like Archer. That's a show where nearly every line of dialogue is clever or funny, and the cast are so rapid fire that even if one bit doesn't quite land, the one immediately after that does. Here, there's a lot of dead air waiting for the audience to finish reacting before the next thing. And if you didn't react at all, then there's just this, like, awkward silence. It's written like a bombastic, off-the-wall slapstick goof fest, but directed like it has a more dry sense of humor, and it clashes so hard that most of the jokes stumble. Maybe it has something to do with the animation style, because stop motion doesn't allow for something as fluid and fast as other types of animation. What Modok is doing and saying is often balls out absurd, but he's doing it really slowly and matter-of-factly, so the punchline is easy to see a mile away. The show is lacking a certain kind of energy that would have really helped it feel more in your face. Some of the best scenes are when it does capture that energy and the back and forth in the dialogue starts to have a really dynamic rhythm. The conference call scene is by far my favorite in the whole show because it does have that manic energy, and it doesn't dwell too long on any one part of the joke. It just keeps building and building, and it's fucking hilarious. The other factor that drags the comedy down for me is the voice acting. The cast of this show are all funny people and good voice actors, full stop. But I don't know if a lot of them are fit exactly for these specific characters. Patton Oswalt, who voices Modok, seems to have found himself a niche as the funny animated character in adult comedy stuff. Between his role as Happy the Imaginary Unicorn, or the stupid talking gills in that dream sequence in The Boys, and a bunch of other stuff like that. His voice is unique and fits animated characters well, but Modok could have benefited from someone sounding a lot more cartoony and out there.
I need quiet, Jody. My masterful computer brain is processing incredibly complicated. Oh, I put a paperclip in the little hole in my time machine watching thing, and something's happening.
Oswald's delivery is very ordinary and down to earth, which is why he works well as more normal and relatable animated characters. He can also sound like a really nice and comforting character like Happy, which contrasts well with the blunt rudeness of that show's main character.
I think it's because you believe in me.
Fascinating.
Uh-huh. Now, believe in this! We break into Austin's office, hack his brain before he signs, and revert control of AIM to me! We're doing a mind heist, baby!
But this is a role where he was supposed to turn up his own blunt rudeness, and I don't really think it worked. He sounds too nice to pull off the part of a lovable jerk, so it isn't as funny when he says something rude. The lovable part just kind of flops. And he sounds too normal to play such a crazy-looking and oddball character.
So he's gonna do whatever he wants at his bar mitzvah, whether you like it or not.
Modok.
Fine, we'll diaper the doves.
It's just that.
Sew their buttholes shut. You're a monster.
I think Modok's persona as an insane supervillain needed a voice that sounds more naturally villainous or unhinged, or could pull off that cruelty with more of a charisma. Maybe Tom Kenny.
Ha! I'm not gonna lose. I've got a foolproof plan for winning. I'm gonna cheat.
Or John DiMaggio.
Wait! That's it!
What's it?
Ow! The answer is not to build myself up. It's to knock the competition down.
Or Kevin Michael Richardson.
Let's brighten up the brownstones with some Choco White.
Or even Alan Tudyk.
A superhero team I can actually get behind. A superhero team I can actually use.
Alan Tudyk is mostly a DC guy from what I could tell, but by God, does he do a good job of sounding like a crazy evil weirdo. Because as it is, Modok doesn't really sound like a supervillain, and the ordinariness of his voice makes him sound wrong delivering lines where he has to be an asshole to his family.
Magic? Lou, why can't you just pick a normal teenage boy theme? Like sports, or tugboats?
When it's delivered this flatly, it's just like, oh, well, that's a shitty thing to say to your son. But if he said that same thing like a comic book supervillain, it might have come off as more playful and funny. The other big drag on the voice cast is Ben Schwartz, who I'll say for sure is one of my absolute favorite Sonic voice actors, and I loved him as Leonardo. But playing a hyperactive 13-year-old? He doesn't sound 13, or even anywhere near close to it.
90% of magic's in the flair. David Copperfield said that. 90% of magic's in the hair. David Copperfield's hair plug guy said that.
Modok's son Lou is supposed to be a kid, but his voice is that of a grown man, and it just doesn't fit well. I guess Schwartz's natural charisma as a voice actor still comes through though, because eventually he started to grow on me near the end of the season. Especially after they gave his character a robot twin so they could sort of bounce off each other. Weirdly enough, just having two of that character seemed to make him a little more unique. As much as this show fails to impress me, I am pretty fascinated by the visual style. I love the stop motion animation, and I know that on a technical level it took an incredible amount of work, especially some of the more fast-paced fight scenes that have a lot of motion and dynamic camera movement. That's all an A+ from me. But if I had any gripe, it's that it feels like sometimes it's a little overdone in dialogue scenes, where not as much movement is necessary. The whole show is animated to give the illusion that it's shot like an unscripted documentary with these shaky cams and quick zooms and pans, but there's no narrative element explaining that. This isn't a Modok version of The Office. There's no camera crew following the character around or interview segments where they talk to the camera. Like, look at this shot. It looks like the cameraman is walking around the car and onto the grass to get a better look at what's going on. And I know simulating these footsteps must have been a colossal pain in the ass, but like, why is it there? It's visually super impressive as a gimmick, but it doesn't feel motivated by anything other than to just flex that they could do it. They could have saved a lot of time if they dialed back all the simulated handheld stuff and just focused more on character motion. The first season's story ends on a cliffhanger, and I can't really say I was happy with the conclusion. They didn't resolve as much as I would have liked them to, and we're still not even close to completing Modok's character arc. You know, learning to be more respectful and sensitive to the people he cares about. While it's certainly a step up from other asshole cartoon dads that learn to be nice for one episode only before snapping back to being a dick again next week, it just feels like we spent 10 episodes not really getting anywhere. In the final 2 episodes, he comes up with a clever plan to defeat the board of directors that have stolen AIM from him, screws over Iron Man a bit, then he prepares his son's bar mitzvah, which they've been talking about all season. He got his company back and more or less made amends with his beset upon and infinitely more talented second-in-command Monica, but we really didn't see him set things straight with his family, which was the heart of the whole season. Right as he's starting to make progress and reconnect with them, hanging out with his son, being nice to his wife and his daughter, he backslides and lets them all die in a horrible explosion perpetrated by a time-traveling alternate version of himself. So all the progress he made throughout the season has been set back to even worse than where he started. If there even is a season 2, it will likely begin with him trying to use time travel to resurrect them. But at this point, we really can't root for him anymore because he went too far into being a scumbag and he's just not likable as a protagonist. This show shot itself in the foot by just not knowing how to make us care about Modok. And it would ultimately be frustrating if his family just forgives him in the end. In fact, the only saving grace of this show's writing so far is that his family have a low tolerance for his bullshit, and reasonably push him out for being so toxic. It wouldn't make any sense for his family to just let him backpedal this. If they don't forgive him, the show's just sort of over and Modok won't learn anything. If they do, they'll be too inconsistently written to be believable anymore. It's the problem most people have with Rick Sanchez always getting a pass for abusive and shitty behavior. Except Modok isn't funny and endearing like Rick Sanchez, so it's even harder for the audience to forgive him. I really don't know what they could do to save his character at this point without it feeling incredibly forced. They wrote themselves into a corner. I've often found attempts at making Modok a comic relief character in other similar projects pretty grating. And this show really didn't change that. Modok was never really meant to be a comedy character, but they keep trying to take him to that realm. But I think he can be really intimidating if you acknowledge the grotesque, disgusting body horror of his design. I'd be happy to just see the character taken kinda seriously and played straight from now on instead of this constant square peg in a round hole of trying to make him funny and endearing. I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Avengers game got something right. At least this animated show didn't unintentionally dox anyone, though. Overall, it's not a terrible show or anything. There's a lot of potentially interesting stuff here, but it's done in the least interesting way, so it's just meh. I like the concept of an adult animated comedy in the Marvel Universe. The animation style is really impressive and unique, and with a lot of tweaking, this could become something special. A show about an incompetent mad scientist supervillain could work if they figure out how we're supposed to feel about him as a character, and then sticking to that. Maybe recasting some of the voices, taking better advantage of the Marvel setting and including more superheroes and villains we recognize, ditching some of the bland original characters, and tightening up the animation and direction could all go a long way, but I may be asking too much. Like, my constructive criticism for the show is just change everything about it. Season 1 was handled clumsily and missed the mark for what it was going for, either by playing it too safe or by having a hard time nailing down its tone and direction. I'm not terribly optimistic about the show's future with the way Season 2 has been set up so awkwardly. Again, if that even happens. And I don't know if this show has the legs to really persist considering it generated zero buzz or discussion online. Even comic fans are barely talking about it, and they love to argue about shit. If you can't even get comic book Twitter debating, then you've made something pretty stale. I like Modok better when he was Bruce Campbell.